Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Scott Anderson, President and CEO of Zions Bank, and it's my honor to welcome all of you to today's community speaker series, Solving for Housing in the Economic Inclusion Equation. For those of you who tuned into our last speaker series on economic inclusion, you may recall the topic of housing being a reoccurring concern in the equity and equality and opportunity conversation. Homeownership plays a critical role in closing the racial wealth gap, as well as building generation wealth for all families. In recent news, we read that Utah and Idaho's housing markets are red hot, and at the same time, they've been described for those with less resources as unhealthy and severely imbalanced. With the rapid population growth happening in Utah and Idaho, our supply of housing, especially affordable housing, has been unable to keep up with the demand. Utah and Idaho residents can't afford to buy homes in their home state. So today's conversation is intended to help us understand why and what can be done. We have a stellar cast with us to be on our panel, and I would like to personally thank each of our panelists for taking time to join us today to share their particular insights and lend their expertise on the current housing market. We have Marcia Garcia, CEO of Neighborworks Salt Lake, who has been a longtime partner of Zions Bank. We have John Chung, CFO of the Idaho Housing and Finance Association. We have Dustin Jansen, Director of the Utah Department of Indian Affairs. And from our own employee base, we have Michael Gould, who leads our division of mortgage lending, Shillian, who manages our community and regional development efforts and has been a real help to the legislature in looking at housing issues and homelessness issues. And we have Robert Rendon, our Director of Community Engagement and Responsibility, and he oversees our CRA activities. We are truly fortunate to have the opportunity to learn from these leading experts in affordable housing and to examine the impact our current housing market is having on the most vulnerable populations in our communities. Thank you again for joining us today for this series, Solving for Housing in the Economic Inclusion Equation. Building economic inclusion, as I've said in the past, begins with us. It begins with me, and it begins with you. So now I'd like to turn the time over to Sue Lang Pinoque, our Senior Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, who will introduce our panelists, and she will also co-host today's conversation with Michael Gould. So Sue Lang.
Thank you so much, Scott, for that warm welcome and for your visionary leadership and commitment to building equality, equity, and opportunity inside and outside of the bank. For those of you who are tuning into our community speaker series for the first time, welcome. Zions Bank launched our speaker series platform in February of this year to create a space to initiate meaningful conversations on the most current and relevant topics impacting the businesses and communities that we serve. Today's conversation marks our 6th speaker series to date. Throughout 2021, we have featured a diversity of power speakers who have shared their perspectives and experiences on a broad range of topics, including history, race, sports, economic inclusion, women's equality, gender equity, bravery and leadership, mental health, and building inclusive cultures in our communities. For a recap of our speaker series or to watch or rewatch any of our speaker series events, please visit zionsbank.com and click on community. All of our events will be recorded and posted on our community page. Our vision for our speaker series is to be a resource to community leaders like you by providing a collection of meaningful conversations, showcasing a diversity of thought from a diversity of leaders. Our community speaker series will be hosted quarterly, addressing one of the 4 policy priorities outlined in the Utah Compact on racial equity, diversity, and inclusion, which are education, employment, housing, and healthcare. You've heard me describe the work that we do before as being in the business of opening hearts and strengthening minds. We believe that if we as a community can work together in that spirit and in that mindset, we will strengthen our ability to generate the most creative and innovative solutions to the most pressing challenges we are facing today. Now, our goal and your role. Our goal is to highlight achievement, elevate leadership, and foster engagement in our communities. Your role is to join these conversations and take what you've learned and continue that conversation in your respective organizations. This is how we will together set in motion a social and cultural shift that will lead to economic inclusion, prosperity, and growth. I also want to note that we've opened up the chat feature in today's conversation, so feel free to comment on what is being said, and I will do my best to monitor the chat for any questions that you may have. Please note we have also reserved the last 15 minutes for today's conversation for Q&A. Now, back to the hot topic of today, solving for housing and the economic inclusion equation. As Scott stated earlier, Utah and Idaho residents can't afford to buy homes in their home states. This is extremely frustrating. So today's conversation is intended to help us understand why and what can be done. With no further ado, I'd like to introduce my colleagues who will be joining us for today's conversation. We are truly honored to have Michael Gould, our Executive Vice President, overseeing our mortgage lending division across Zions Bank Corporation, serving as our co-host. Welcome, Michael. Robert Rendon, Senior Vice President and Director of Community Engagement and Responsibility at Zions Bank. Good to see you as usual, Rendon. John Chung, Chief Financial Officer of the Idaho Housing and Finance Association. Thank you so much for joining us, John. Maria Garcia, CEO of Neighborworks, Salt Lake. Always a pleasure to see you, Maria. Shillian Gee, Senior Vice President of our Community and Regional Development Efforts at Zions Bank. Thanks again for joining us, Shillian. And Dustin Jansen, who is the Director of Utah's Division of Indian Affairs. Such an honor to have you with us as well. So welcome, everyone. I'd like to set up today's conversation with data and research. I want to personally and publicly thank our partners at the Kem Gardner Policy Institute, who are the masterminds behind producing the Diversity in Utah data book. Now, this data book is available to everyone and anyone who wants a copy of it. You can download a free copy of the data book at the Kem Gardner Policy Institute's website. And just last month, the Institute also released a brief titled The State of the State's Housing Market. Now, these two resources will serve as the foundational basis for today's conversation. Now, in recent months, Utah and Idaho's housing markets have been defined as hot, unhealthy, and severely imbalanced. Now, generally what that means is our supply is unable to keep up with the demand. And I'd love to hear our panelists' opinions on exactly what this means as we dive deeper into the conversation. But I'd like to start off by citing some of the findings coming directly out of the Policy Institute's research. So the first fact I want to share is more than half of Utah's households are unable to afford the median priced income home. By the end of 2020, the median price reached $380,000, pricing out approximately 48.5% of Utah households. As prices accelerated in 2021, more than half of Utah households are unable to afford the median priced home. For renters, the path to ownership narrowed even further. In 2019, approximately 63.1% of renter households were priced out of the median home price. In 2020, the share of renters priced out increased to 72.8%. Now, when it comes to median household income, Utah's median household income increased from $62,912 in 2015 to $75,780 in 2019, growing 20.5%. Regardless of the growth in household income, affordability decreased in every income bracket. The availability of affordable entry-priced housing has decreased over the last 5 years. And households with incomes less than $50,000 in 2015 could afford 70.6% of homes on the market that year. And in 2020, their share of affordable homes has decreased to 31.3%. Now, I'm going to pose the affordability question to launch today's conversation. Although Utah's median household income has increased 20.5% since 2015, the median cost of homes in Utah and Idaho has increased at even higher rates. When we look at the year over quarterly increase in the housing price index, the increase from Q2 2020 to Q2 in 2021, was 28.3% in Utah. That is the second highest in the nation. And if you think that's high, what's even higher is 37.1% increase in Idaho, the highest in the nation. So with that said, I'm going to pass the buck over to Michael and pose this question. As a community leader in mortgage lending, how have these shifts in Utah and Idaho's housing markets impacted the pathway of home ownership for Utah and Idaho residents? And what are financial institutions doing to make home ownership more accessible to both first-time and low to moderate income home buyers? I know that's a big question.
Big question, great question. Thank you, Sue. I would start off by saying, just to add context to those numbers, we've also had historically low interest rates. So when you add that to the decline in affordability with some of the lowest interest rates any of us have seen, you really start looking at a much broader issue as interest rates rise. They've risen the end of this year, and we expect them to do so next year. We've seen almost a fatigue in a lot of our first-time home buyers in their searches, multiple scenarios where they're putting in offers, 10, 12, 15 offers, not getting them accepted. You're kind of in a catch-22 situation where, as a realtor or a listing agent, you'd like to get the most out of your listing and maybe take a cash offer, and that certainly impacts and affects in a negative way our ability to get those offers accepted for a lot of our pre-approved first-time home buyers. From a financial institution standpoint, there are some really good programs that are out there designed specifically for low to moderate income families. Some expanded lending criteria as far as the underwriting guidelines go, and the ability to really focus in on majority minority census tracts, as well as those low to moderate income census tracts. So with that, maybe I can have Robert jump in here and help me with these questions and answer some of these. Robert, recognizing that the biggest obstacle for first-time home buyers and low to moderate income home buyers is the down payment, and we have several issues involving housing: one, affordable inventory, and two, available credit. What do you see, and what are some of the things that you're working on?
Well, what I want to talk about first is a program that the Federal Home Loan Bank has, the Affordable Housing Program, AHP. And anyway, our bank has been very successful in the last 3 years. We've actually brought in about $5.7 million into multifamily housing, and it's really, most of that housing is looking at those coming out of homelessness. And I just wanted to mention a few here. We're able to secure $750,000 for the Peace House in Park City, which is an emergency shelter, and one that we've been very successful, the First Step House, which is a project, if you're familiar with Salt Lake City, across from the Smiths downtown. And we actually got $630,000 for phase 1 and $400,000 for phase 2. And just recently, they had a ribbon cutting for the Magnolia, which is in downtown Salt Lake City. And we were able to, that's for permanent supportive housing. And we were able to secure $750,000. But one thing that we're very happy about is that we're able to, for the first time in the last few years, got some funds for houses for things outside of Salt Lake City or Ogden. For Neighborworks Mountain Country, we actually got $98,000 for a fourplex in Escalante. And this one here, we had $49,000 for 2 houses in Tropic. I must admit, I did not know where Tropic was, but like I said, we've been very, very successful. Another one is that we was Epic in Green River. We actually got $150,000 for 5 new homes there in Green River. And anyway, that's just a few of them, but that's a program that is very, very competitive. We actually compete with 14 other states, but I will tell you that the two things have to happen. You have to have a good project, and you have to have a bank that knows what they're doing. And I do want to say that we are very skilled at making sure those applications are successful, and you can't do it without a team. Without my team, with Stephanie Toby and Hannah Williams and Sandra Hollins, but I don't think there's anybody more skilled in our state to putting those applications together. And history has told us that by the amount of money we've been able to bring into the state of Utah.
Great. Thank you, Robert. A great comments there. I'm going to go to John now. And John, as hot as the Utah market's been, Idaho has been even hotter. You know, as we've helped a lot of our customers try and procure housing and financing for properties there in Idaho, it's certainly the fatigue and the multiple offers, and it's certainly relevant there in the Idaho market as well. Can you tell us what your group's doing currently and what more can be done?
Sure. Can you hear me okay? So first of all, I want to thank you for having me talk to my favorite bankers. And we have recently done a lot with Zions Bank and moved over all kinds of businesses from other banks into Zions because we like what you do. And I'm also proud to tell you guys that Zions Bank has just become a sponsor in our fundraising effort this month for fighting homelessness and housing issues in Idaho. So thank you for that. Thank you, Scott. Much appreciated. So Idaho Housing is, it's a housing agency. Utah has one, and we do what we can to help. With our mission, which is to preserve affordable housing in the state of Idaho. And, I've only been here a couple of years, but boy, prices have gone up and I've seen all these issues happen here. And what I can tell you is that we do, multiple things: single family, multifamily. We do homelessness, housing issues. We issue transportation bonds, bonds for charter school buildings in Idaho. But what is the biggest impact that we can make in the state of Idaho? And that is down payment assistance, right? The down payment assistance that we provide, does not use any state funding or taxes, local or state taxes. We provide not only down payment assistance but also closing costs. And unlike other states, we don't require first-time home buyer requirement for them to receive down payment assistance. We do single family townhomes, condos, and even manufactured housing. And for affordability, our sweet spot is, measured by their household income and where they sit in the percentile of the area median income, which is 80%, not 100%, but 80% or below. And those people get not just down payment assistance, but also at or below market mortgage rates. So, for example, we have a program called Idaho Heroes Program, where Idaho's essential workers like police officers and firefighters, nurses, doctors, teachers, etc., they get preferred mortgage rates, and that helps with them for the underwriting. And in terms of down payment assistance, we used to have a 7% in total, but we have 3.5% maximums, but we now have 5% maximums in two different categories. So in combination, you can get up to 7% of the sale price of a home, but we have what's called a second mortgage, and that's a 10-year amortizing loan at a 5% interest rate. And that you can get up to 5% on its own. You can also get a forgivable loan at a 5% maximum, and that's forgiven 10% per year for 10 years. So, you know, you can get up to 7% of a sales price of a home. You know, who can give that to you? We fund it with organic cash flow, you know, from our profits. We don't use state tax or, you know, any other assistance. It's all organically deployed. So, you know, we're proud of doing what we can to help, you know, people fight huge increases in home prices. But, you know, at 7%, I think that's big money. So we have been doing a lot. And so to give you an example, we do over 40% of all the mortgages in our target market in Idaho. 40%, that's a lot. Last fiscal year, we provided over $3 billion of mortgages in this, you know, small population state of Idaho. And just to give you a little PR about what we do, we service our own loans, which a lot of our, you know, fellow housing finance agencies don't or can't do. So in fact, we service loans for 6 other states: Washington, New Mexico, Connecticut, Texas, Iowa, and South Dakota. And starting in 2022, we will also be servicing Oregon housing agencies loans. Our servicing portfolio currently stands at $23 billion. So it's a large portfolio. So hopefully that answers your question about DPA.
Absolutely. Thank you for addressing the down payment question. That comes up from a financing perspective over and over. It's a real obstacle for first-time home buyers, especially as houses continue to increase, costs continue to increase, coming up with that down payment. Maria, I'd like to go to you. I know you've been involved with this for quite some time. You know, one of the issues that we see is just getting the word out that there are these programs that are available to address these issues. Can you talk a little bit about what we can do to better get the word out, make people more aware, and talk about what your organization is currently doing?
Well, so thank you. This forum today is a good way to get the word out, because it's certainly, you know, will be recorded and we can push it out. But to introduce you to Neighborworks Salt Lake, for those of you not familiar, it's a 44-year-old not-for-profit development organization established in 1977. I believe Zions Bank was one of the founders. And it was created as a result of redlining and disinvestment that was occurring in Salt Lake City neighborhoods. And our primary mission is comprehensive neighborhood revitalization. And we do this through mixed income, single family, multifamily, real estate, non-traditional lending products, so products that Zions Bank might not offer, small business development, like we love to work with the mom and pops, and then community engagement. Very important to us, our resident and youth leadership. So in response to the affordable inventory, and I always tell people affordable is a relative term. What's affordable for me might be different for you. But as a not-for-profit developer, Neighborworks is in the design and permitting process for 30 single-family units in Salt Lake City and Murray that will serve low and moderate income families. While the cost to build these homes does not differ from the market, what will make these units affordable is the homes will be sold through a shared equity program. I'm excited about this. Shared equity creates affordable home ownership opportunities for families with modest incomes. And so those individuals that Sue, you highlighted, buying a home usually has 2 components, the house and the land on which it is built. By selling only the home and leasing the land to a homeowner at an affordable rate, this significantly reduces the cost of buying a home, and the land is owned by a community land trust. So an example might be one of the homes that we hope to build in spring may be appraised at $400,000, the land at $100,000. The family only has to qualify for a $300,000 mortgage. Maybe that will happen through Zions Bank. Qualifying home buyers who participate in a shared equity program agreed to sell the property only to other income qualified buyers and must share the home's appreciation with the community land trust that subsidized the original purchase if the homeowner decides to ever sell the home. If the buyer agrees to the shared equity terms and purchases a home, they can remain in the home as long as they would like, and they can even pass it on to next generation. That's what makes it exciting, I think, for us. So this is a strategy that has been successful in high cost areas throughout the country, and even in our own backyard. Mountain Lands Community Trust in Summit County has a successful track record with their land trust program. These types of trusts, I think, is an option Neighborworks believes will help families achieve home ownership, build equity, and bridge that gap that continues to increase in high cost housing areas. I've been in this business for nearly 40 years. I never thought I would see the cost of housing go this high. And then finally, in terms of available credit, Neighborworks, in partnership with local government in Salt Lake City and Murray, are offering up to $20,000 in down payment forgivable loans for first-time home buyers. So if they live in the home for 5 years, that $20,000 will go away. We also have partnerships with local lending institutions for an 80-20 mortgage. The bank provides 80% loan and Neighborworks provides a 20% loan. What we like about this is it eliminates the mortgage insurance and can reduce the monthly mortgage payment for the borrower. And there are many other programs that we would love to share with everyone. And if people are interested in getting on our waiting list for homes under the Community Land Trust or learning more about home ownership and our products, I'll put that information in the chat.
Hey, Maria, a lot of great things from Neighborworks. Certainly, hopefully Zions can participate in those, and look forward to connecting with you more on that. Shillian, I know you've been waiting patiently. I'm going to turn this time over to you and have you give us a little bit of background on what your group, your team's currently doing to address some of these issues and what else can be done.
Well, thanks so much. I'm so happy to be here with all of you and happy to follow up on things that Maria is saying, because it's so close to what I'm working on. And Mike, you're opening with that very frustrating moment as to what happens when a home buyer is trying to purchase a home is at the core of everything we're doing. For my work at the bank, it's also focusing on what happens even after that home buyer is able to purchase a home, assuming they can, and it becomes increasingly difficult to maintain and afford that home as it goes forward. So at Zions Bank, I work at the community level. So thinking about the different pressures that are coming in around those moments for potential home buyers and how they got to be. And my work involves creating and facilitating partnerships between public entities and private entities, institutional entities, to address some of the forces at play that again are creating that really frustrating moment for people. So I would expand out, you mentioned the two issues being affordable inventory and available credit. And in the partnerships that Zions is trying to facilitate and put together, we expand that out a little bit. Maria mentioned some of them. So in terms of inventory, we're thinking about the roofs themselves, the houses that get built, but we're also very much thinking about the land and the availability of the land that those homes are on. In terms of credit, we're thinking about credit and financing for the individual home buyer, but we're also very much thinking about credit and financing for the builder, for the developer, for the community organizations such as Maria's that's helping to facilitate. There are similar pressures on all of those actors there that we're trying to address. And we also think about the social and the economic and the physical infrastructure that surrounds that house that someone's trying to buy or is going to buy. So we're very aware that if you are able to build a house on a piece of land and offer it to sale and someone's able to buy it, there are still often pressures in that community about whether that house can be maintained, whether the life inside that house can be maintained. And this all comes to bear on affordability and some of the issues that we're talking about. So we're thinking about it in a couple of key ways. Some of them have been mentioned, most of them. Number one, preservation of existing housing, affordable housing stock. We focus significantly on supporting collaborative partnerships that are doing that in our community, so that as rapidly as we can build, we're not losing affordable housing stock out the door, which is a big problem that often doesn't get talked about. We're also thinking about better ways of understanding and utilizing publicly owned real estate to support some of these solutions. So where we're in a crunch for land, what do we know about what we already own as a collective community, and how can we better utilize that? Maria mentioned land trusts, things like that. There's a range of ways to think about the land we own. And this is really important because we don't often know what that land is. We think about parks and we think about library spaces, but there's a whole other asset portfolio there that we're trying to work on. And then we also think about innovative, Maria mentioned this too, home ownership models, shared equity models, people coming in to help with the down payment or help with the payments and help with the ownership structure. And a lot of times this is working between individuals and an organization. Sometimes it can work between individuals and an employer. But there's a lot of creative things going on in the communities thinking about ownership types and models that we're trying to facilitate. We also are thinking about innovative partnerships focused on the builder and the developer because they have affordability issues too, and trying to build something that's affordable for people to buy. And so how can we share that cost as a community as well and get some innovative financing structures in there? And then finally, going back to the question of the social infrastructure, we're partnering with organizations that understand housing in a broader community context. So again, making sure that once we build that house and we have a way for people to afford it, as difficult as those things already are, how are we ensuring that the appropriate resources are in that neighborhood, in that community, in the region, or in the state to help that homeowner sustain that home and sustain a livelihood. And keep that home in the family and in the generations and build some equity and wealth out of it.
Great points. Thank you for sharing those. A lot of great information there. And with that, Sue, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. I just want to thank Michael, Robert, John, Maria, and Shillian for sharing the important projects and programs that all of you are working on. Solving for housing in the economic inclusion equation is there's a lot of moving parts to this thing. And so we are truly honored to have all of you share that important work. A couple of things I just want to note. One of our roles here is to provide resources. I just wanted to share a book called The Color of Law. And Maria mentioned redlining. If you want to learn about the impact of redlining and how we can reverse the impact of redlining, this is disparities that exist in housing, home ownership. This is a go-to book by Richard Rothstein. Maria is an expert at this book. She studied it. She knows it like the back of her hand. Tremendous resource for all of you working in some of the most vulnerable communities and populations across Utah and Idaho. With that said, I also wanted to go back to the Diversity in Utah data book and bring in Dustin Jansen just a second to shed some light on how some of the most vulnerable communities and populations have been impacted by the housing market. So Jared, if you could bring up that slide, just wanted to show a couple of images outlined in the data book. Number one, the Utah population based on poverty, broken down by racial and ethnic groups. The two largest significant populations or significant portions of ethnic groups are American Indian, Alaskan Natives, and the Black community. Over 27% of those ethnic communities in the state of Utah are living in poverty. Moving on to the share of Utah renters by race and ethnicity, paying at least 50% of their income for housing. You'll see the largest community impacted by this is the Black community at 31%. And then the other ethnic communities from Asian, American Indian, Pacific Islander, and Hispanic range between 18 to 22% as well. Also looking at the median household income based on race and ethnicity. The bottom two, African American, Black community, and the Native American, American Indian community. So with that said, I wanted to turn the time over to Dustin Jansen, who is the director of Utah's Division of Indian Affairs, who could kind of provide some insight on what the most vulnerable populations in the state of Utah are experiencing right now. So with that, Dustin, such an honor to have you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to speak here and to share a little bit of background. I think you look at the charts you just showed. I think I need to give some background about why those are the way they are. Native American home ownership and economics, it's a little bit difficult to explain. There are 574 federally recognized sovereign nations within the United States. And as culturally unique each one of these tribes are, an important note is how unique each tribe is geographically. Tribal lands are located all over the country. Some have relatively easier access to develop infrastructure, water, electricity, internet, lumber, whatever that may be. While others are very remotely located, and accessing that basic infrastructure can be really difficult. I don't feel like I'm that old. I'm 47 years old, but in 1992, when I was in high school, that was the first time I had running water in my house, and so that was because we had to move to a location of the reservation where that infrastructure was available. Currently, within Utah, there are 8 federally recognized tribes of those 574. We have the San Juan Southern Paiute in southern Utah, the Navajo Nation also in southern Utah, San Juan County, the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe, White Mesa Community, which is just outside of Landing, the Paiute Indian Tribes of Utah and Cedar City, and really they have 5 bands that make up their tribe, and they're just speckled throughout southern Utah. The Northwestern Band of Shoshone, currently headquartered in Ogden, but their traditional lands are pretty much I-80 north up into Idaho. The Skull Valley Band of Goshutes that are located just south of Tooele, and the Confederate Tribes of the Goshute Reservation, Ibapaw, Utah, which is about an hour south of Wendover. And just saying an hour south of Wendover, if you're familiar with this area, you might be thinking that is the middle of nowhere. And it really is. There are no grocery stores out there. They have a small school, an elementary school, but the students have to bus in 60 miles into Wendover for school, and then bus 60 miles back, back home to do that. 60% of Native people live off reservation. A lot of them have moved to urban areas just for better economic opportunities. The remaining 40% live on reservation. And depending on the legal status of land where they're at, if it's held in trust by the federal government or if it's an allotment, they may have trouble seeking home ownership just because they have no collateral to offer, right? There are not a lot of lending institutions that are comfortable loaning money to on-reservation Native Americans where they might have trouble in terms of loan defaults and things like that. How do we get a home back that's on a separate nation? That may cause some difficulty. But home ownership on reservations can be a little bit different. A lot of tribes offer what they call a home site lease, which is usually like a 1 acre plot where a tribal member can build a home or probably move in a modular home there and live. But again, depending on economics and how much the quality of home might be in question, where they're at, and what infrastructure they can actually hook into when they build that home or get that home out there. I mean, I grew up in an area where there were no water lines. A few of us had electrical lines, so that could be a problem depending on where you're at on reservations. There are home loan opportunities for Native people regardless of where they live. There's under the HUD program in the Indian housing section, there's the Section 184 loans that don't require such a demanding credit score or large down payment assistance or large down payments, but still, even with reduced down payments, it can be an obstacle for many Native families where their earning potential, because of where they're located and that available employment, it doesn't give a lot of opportunity to save for a down payment. So that can be difficult. There's something passed in 1996 called the Native American Housing Assistance and Self-Determination Act. They're looking at extending that that act's life up to 2032, but funding under, they call it NAHASDA in Native communities, NAHASDA programs. It's the main source of federal assistance to ensure American Indian and Alaska Natives and even Native Hawaiians to ensure that they have access to safe, accessible, and affordable housing. And this bill that is trying to get pushed through for 2021, the same NAHASDA extension, they're trying to make new eligible activities available, such as to help students, in student housing. A lot of kids that live on reservations, they move off reservation to live, and if they can't afford dorms, or if they don't have housing where apartments have multiple students living in them, it can be very expensive. A lot of Native students that go to college, they don't have family support after that. I was told, if you're going to go to college, you better figure out how to pay for it. And so their parents don't have the money to assist them. And so NAHASDA would extend into student housing, or might include an education-related stipend, college housing assistance, and other type of housing assistance for low-income students. Another obstacle in access to Indian education that Native communities have, in K through 12, which in turn affects the higher education opportunities for these same tribal members, are not all reservations are zoned for business development, right? You can't collect taxes out there on property, and they're not zoned for residential areas either, for that matter. The whole reservations are residential zone depending on where you live, and that can make it difficult for tribes to collect and earn money off their tribal members that live there. And all over most reservations, you're going to have relatives and ancestors buried in different areas of that area. And so developing roads and things like that can be difficult. It's hard for me to share statistics on Native American unemployment. If nationwide, through the 574 tribes out there, unemployment probably ranges from 20% to 80%, depending on where you're at and what's available there. The Bureau of Labor Statistics, they never report on tribal communities. They cite that because of sample size, they don't report monthly on job numbers for American Indian, Alaska Native numbers. But and that may be true, that the sample size may not be very big, but the result is that when these discussions are happening that concern the economic well-being of the nation, Native American communities are being left out of that, not being considered for that. And without those numbers, without those statistics, you're not going to have legislation that properly helps Native communities in that. But if you're looking for urban numbers on urban Indians that are unemployed, the numbers I've seen and looked at, they're usually twice that of the national average. So if the national average is about 3.5%, it's probably 7% for Native people. But that's kind of what we're looking at right now when it comes to Native people, the housing market, looking for homes either on or off reservations, and the obstacles that they run into.
Wow, thank you so much, Dustin, for that comprehensive overview of what our Native American population and community is experiencing. Those statistics hit my heart, as well. I just want to give our panel an opportunity to respond to what Dustin has shared, starting with Robert Rendon. And then Michael, in the interest of time, I think we'll just dive right into Q&A after this.
Okay, I appreciate that. I just wanted to say that maybe, Michael, we can get together, but Zions Bank some years back with NAHASDA was very active in the 184 program. We made various loans in Fort Duchesne, and we actually made the first ever fee simple 184 loan here in Salt Lake City. And as you know, the HUD 184 program, that went a lot quicker than the things we do on the reservations. But we actually did a subdivision for the Northwest Band of Shoshone in Pocatello. It was 8 houses, and we actually made that loan to the tribe, but then we also set it up where they could sell them individually. And this is gonna be hard to believe. I believe that we got that done within 30 days, which is a lot of work. But Michael, maybe we can talk about that, but we were extremely active in the 184 program and NAHASDA.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rendon. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Michael.
No, just absolutely, Robert. Let's connect and
Yeah, my wife and I, we just purchased a home through 184, but we had to actually go outside the state to find a lender that was experienced in working with that. So that's
And I know which one, and Michael, we can talk about that.
Yeah, thank you, Dustin, for sharing that. Shillian, your thoughts?
Well, thank you, Dustin, for those comments. And I just wanted to share and emphasize, again, thinking about also what financial institutions like Zions Bank can do, the pressures that you heard in Dustin's comment, focusing in on that moment of, can an individual secure housing and can that individual then sustain housing, is a very broad scale question that many players are working on, and it varies tremendously from geographic to geographic area. In Utah, Idaho, we're talking about urban, suburban, rural, resort, communities outside significant tourist attractions, sovereign land, tribal land. It's incredibly diverse, and more than ever, it is integrated in terms of what the approach needs to be and how we're addressing that individual moment. We need to address that at the individual level, but also at that larger public, private sector, institutional level in order to alleviate some of that frustration. The focus on infrastructure, Dustin, I think is incredibly important. That is the case, believe it or not, in Utah, in many different communities where questions about access to water, electricity, all of those things, taxed infrastructure systems, non-existent infrastructure systems, financial institutions and their partners, institutionally, public and private, can do a lot to know about that kind of thing and to help address it because of the ways that they're financing different sorts of actors in the problem. So powerful.
Thank you so much, Shillian. Yes, for bringing that that very important point to the forefront. John or Maria, any other thoughts?
Yeah, no, Dustin, thank you for sharing that. I think the only thing I would add is that we are a community development financial institution and partnering with OISTA, which is a coalition of Native CDFIs across the country, but we're also a lender to Native Partnership, which is a not-for-profit developer. So that's our contribution from Salt Lake to try and help various populations. But thank you for your work.
Thank you, Maria. Anything additional, John?
Yeah, so, as business people, it's hard to address the underwriting issue of trying to get your money back with foreclosure in a situation like this. So, any help would be appreciated, not just from, lending perspective, but, addressing the more fundamental problem of a legal issue. So that's beyond the scope of this discussion, but that's out there. What we can do in the immediate term is to, come up with some grant money and, talk about more HUD assistance. But that's our homework.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Lots of work to continue to be done. Just want to address some of the questions that are posted in the chat here. The first one is the money we've been able to bring into the state of Utah. Is our bank financing the housing competition that is keeping current residents and even Zion's employees from achieving home ownership? Who would like to take that one?
Well, I can talk about that. I will tell you that the projects that I mentioned through the affordable housing program, we are financing those projects also.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Robert. And I believe this one will be to John. This is coming from one of our employees in Idaho. Is there consideration for people in high cost counties like Blaine County in Idaho, or does that still fall to 80% of median income?
No, yes, absolutely. It's called workforce housing. Okay. And it's for people that are above 80%, maybe below 120% area. It's called the forgotten middle, if you will. And so we're doing a lot to, look into providing housing in this workforce housing. It's basically resort area where the workers can't find homes because, that area is too expensive. So in Blaine County specifically, we're actually working on a transaction to build, affordable housing for those, the target population that we're talking about. So that's, we're focusing on it, working on it.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, John. Shillian, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think in response to both those questions, and for those of you that know me, I'm a very candid, straightforward.
Nice.
So in terms of the question, are the banks financing your competition for your home? Well, yes, they are. And I think, understanding the responsibility, and this is what this conversation is about too, of a bank to have equitable lending and financing practices that recognize the needs of everyone in the community is at the core of the history that we're talking about here that Maria mentioned, and the core of what is all of our responsibility going forward. And so when we're talking about what Zions Bank and other community-oriented banks are trying to do, it's support growth, but also support existing need and to keep everything balanced. And banks can't do that alone, and the government can't do that alone is the operating premise. And so to answer the second question there, those types of grants, that type of home ownership, what affordability means varies from community to community. And so it does require collaboration. Looking at government defined AMI is really difficult in many situations for many different reasons. As you know, it's a good barometer of X, Y, and Z, but not of A, B, and C in terms of the equation that needs to be solved. And so we also think that partnerships between institutional anchors, public and private, is critical to addressing the need, and just we won't find a solution without that kind of partnership in a community. And recognition of what our community is. Again, thanks so much for the comments about different areas of the state. Tropic, Robert, you mentioned Tropic, a beautiful rural area right between our national parks, one of my favorite communities. We have different needs in different parts of the states, and so different actors are required to come together to solve those needs.
Thank you so much, Shillian, for America Here, everyone. And also just reiterating the important role of community banks, right? And that importance of investing in the community, always be mindful of our needs. Next question is based on the quick skim of the state's housing market. It looked like the housing prices might stabilize in growth rate next year or next few years to a less extreme growth rate. Also, it looked like the interest rates were expected to increase again. Would that be a correct assessment?
I'll take the interest rates, and yes, we do expect interest rates to rise. They've already gone up over the past several months. So look for that. As far as pricing goes and leveling out, it's still supply and demand. So we have an influx of people who want to live in Utah and they want to be part of this state. Until the supply catches up with the demand, I don't know that we're going to see too much of a leveling off.
Thank you so much, Michael. Next one is, these programs are awesome, though for many, the best solution is to relocate to another state with markets friendlier to first-time home buyers. ZBC does not make this relocation easy. Could that be changed? One example is that relocation causes forfeiture of severance package if ZBC employees were to get laid off. So moving to a friendlier market puts an employee first in line, least expensive to fire, or the next round of layoffs like 2019. It would be great if ZBC could make it easier to relocate. Okay, thoughts there? Shillian.
That one too. I think I'll broaden it out. I think, and you heard in some of my comments, employers, where there is an employer and there's a happy and fortunate situation where there is an employer, I think you'll start to see increasing pressure, and probably rightly so, on the employers, any employer, public or private, to think about housing and all its attended things, relocation, all of that sort of thing as a benefit that they need to help work with other partners to provide for employees.
Thank you, Shillian. Emma, thank you for your comment. Native people should have barrier-free access to home ownership. Rocky, thank you for having this. We are in a bit of a fix here in Utah as far as folks buying a house. Will there be a follow-up on the stats you all talked about? Well, I guess I can respond to that. We're going to continue to have these community conversations around the 4 policy priorities every quarter. Also, are there any continuing conversations happening in the organizations that you all serve in that you'd like to share? Shillian? Or that you may know of.
Can you repeat that one? I was thinking about the first part of your comment.
Yeah. Will there be follow-up on the stats we talked about, like continued conversations around this?
Yes, and absolutely. So for those who are particularly interested in the work that I mentioned about collaborations between institutions and different types of institutional actors, and what we're doing to address this, it's an open, ongoing conversation, and would love to be a resource to anyone coming at that question from any perspective.
Agreed. Also wanted to note, I believe the Kim Gardner Policy Institute will be producing this same data and research at least every 2 years, if not more frequently. Any other contributions there?
I think the only thing I would add, Sui, is that the Governor's Multicultural Commission is always has housing at the forefront, and they have a new committee, Utah Economic Opportunity Community Advisory Committee, that's focused a lot on housing. So I think that housing is a priority, right? It is critical. So it's now become a priority at the state. And so I think I would agree that the conversations will continue and more initiatives will occur.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Maria. And hey, while we're on you, would you mind explaining your virtual background real quickly?
So our tagline is rebuilding neighborhoods, house by house, block by block, neighbor by neighbor. And this was a commission piece by just a local artist who did this with spray cans in one day in the back of our building. Thanks for asking.
I love that so much. I want to come visit your building just to get my photo in front of the wall. Okay. Do you offer retiree financing for people with limited incomes? Any suggestion for home ownership for this population?
We do at Zions Bank. There's multiple programs that are available. So it's really just best to connect with a lending officer and walk through what those options are.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. And the last question, what would be the best way to improve the infrastructure on Native American reservations? What can banks and citizens do, Dustin?
I think you could just begin talking with tribal governments at this point. My office isn't really here to tell tribes how to do things. We're here to facilitate a conversation between state government and tribal governments, and hopefully develop partnerships in ways that can better the living situations out there. Governor Cox, the previous governor, Governor Herbert, they understood that healthy tribal nations create healthier states, and so that conversation is always willing to be had on the state government level. It's just a matter of figuring out how tribes want to go about doing it, respecting that sovereignty, respecting their ability to make those decisions, and just being able to use our resources the best way possible.
Thank you so much, Dustin. Shillian, did you have anything to add?
Just to underscore again what Dustin's saying and broaden it out as well. I think knowing what the public infrastructure and private infrastructure and the land is from community to community, all very different, is really key to understanding what the needs are. And those partnerships are going to be key to solving what the problems there are. They're going to vary, but knowing what you're talking about and talking and listening to the community is absolutely critical. And no community will be able to do it alone.
Thank you so much.
I just want to add, I agree with that. We have done work with the Ute tribe and the Navajo Partnership for Housing, and you can see the differences in the housing issues that they are facing. In fact, we signed an MOU with the Ute tribe many years ago with the Zions Bank and Fannie Mae, which was pretty historic. But I've been very fortunate to visit almost all the tribes in the state of Utah over my last 20-some years, and like I said, they all face their own individual issues with housing. They all have a housing entity that does some great work also.
Thank you so much, Robert. I also just wanted to know, November is Native American Heritage Month. I just want to honor the history and the valuable contributions that our Native Americans and American Indians have brought to our communities. With that said, as we wrap up, I would just love to hear from each of our panelists, including our co-host, Michael Gould. One takeaway from today's conversation. Go ahead, Michael.
I'd say if there was one word, it'd be collaboration. We've got a lot of great minds here that have resources that are available, collaborating together to bring to the forefront. Be my number one takeaway.
Love that so much. Robert.
You know, I would just ditto that. It is all about partnerships, and I will say, yeah, Zions Bank has been a partnership with Neighborworks all 44 years. I think I've been there 24 years, and I was board president at one time, and all I did was follow Maria's lead.
I believe that. Thank you, Rendon. John.
Yeah, thank you. I applaud your efforts, and I'm glad I picked Zions to work with.
We're happy about that too. Thank you, John. Maria.
Well, you heard me. Shared equity is the next wave of housing affordability, and looking forward to visiting with you all about it.
Love that so much. Shillian.
I would just go back to that frustrating moment that Mike started with. And when you're seeking to buy or you're seeking to maintain your home, there are many forces at play that are causing the frustration that you're experiencing. And all the institutions and major organizations in your community are responsible for that and have a responsibility to help you and your community with that.
Agreed. And Dustin.
I just want to thank Zions for the work that they're doing and for their understanding of how housing affects Native people both on and off reservation, for their work there. And I agree that to move forward, we're going to have to talk a little more, consult with one another, and that might need to be done a lot sooner than later for us to keep up with everything. So I hope it moves forward well.
Agreed. I feel like today's conversation is just the beginning. And in closing, I want to thank our power panel of power speakers and community leaders who have been and continue to lead out on life-changing work in the communities that we serve. The work you all are doing is literally changing the game, and it is truly inspiring to learn from each one of you. Thank you, Michael, for serving as co-host of our Solving for Housing conversation. Thank you, Scott, for your continued visionary leadership and commitment to this important work. And thank you to each and every one of you for taking the time to Zoom in today. One voice, one story, one conversation can make the difference. And it is our hope that the conversation we initiated today will lead to all of us working together to generate creative and innovative solutions that will make the dream of home ownership a reality for all families. Building an inclusive and equitable housing market begins with us. It begins with me. It begins with Scott, Michael, Robert, John, Maria, Shillian, Dustin, and it begins with you. We now encourage all of you to take what you learned today and continue the conversation in your respective organizations. This is how we will together set in motion a social and cultural shift that will lead to economic inclusion, prosperity, and growth. Our next community speaker series will be in February 2022. Stay tuned for details on our Zions Bank community page. Until then, we hope you have a wonderful holiday season, and we look forward to celebrating the new year with all of you.